Hi everyone, I'm Susanna and I'm the Millennial Jamaican, and today we're talking about Trinidad and Tobago, which is celebrating 58 years of independence this month. We're speaking to three talented, brilliant Trimbagonians who added so much light to this conversation, and I feel like it blossomed so beautifully as we walked through. Hi guys, thank you for being with me today.
Hi.
Thank you for having
Hi.
us.
So I'd love you guys to introduce yourselves. So Jenissa, tell everybody who you are.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jenissa. As Susanna said, I am a writer, designer. I have a blog called Ancestral Memory, which is a lifestyle blog. I cover various issues, but particularly those regarding travel, Caribbean lifestyle, and other things that interest me, such as literature and major bookworms. So that and travel are probably two of the main things that I'm passionate about and sharing through the blog.
And Anika.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Aneakaleigh. I am a 27-year-old English teacher based in Murcia, Spain. Been traveling and teaching English for the last 5 years, and that led me to create the Caribbean Millennial blog, which is a platform and community that's dedicated to giving Caribbean millennials the tools and resources they need to confidently move abroad and transform their lives from stagnant to thriving. And so, yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome.
And Ruqayyah, tell everybody who you are.
Hi everyone. My name is Ruqayyah Scott. I am a 20-year-old woman from Trinidad. I am very much involved in economics. That is my passion. That's what I study. That's what I do. I'm the president of the EWE Economic Society, and I do a lot of work with civil organizations and that are both local, regional, and international. And for me, I sort of like civic engagement, as it really gives that micro community level sort of change, and couple that with my economic studies. I am also studying the macro of everything. So I see the work that I do, both academic and non-academic, sort of merging together to really try and create the change that I want to see. I mean, I'm also a writer and founder of a very new blog. The name of it is A Youthful Agenda, and it is a platform that I use to voice my opinions and stuff that I see in society happening all around me. So yeah, so that's it for me.
Thank you guys. So we could jump right in, and I know Jenissa is going first.
So the first question is, how have you witnessed your country change for the better or worse over the last few years, whether that be economically, socially, or culturally, etc.? That's a gargantuan question on both sides of the equation, right? Positively and negatively. I know I'm 38 years old. I'll be 39 this year, so I'm assuming I might be the oldest one in the group. So I know that may help to color my perspective a bit. I will take it back further. I will say that over the past 15 years or so, one of the main changes that has pained me has been the steadily increase of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's such a contrast to when I was growing up. Not that we didn't have crime, but the crime rates were so low back then. Everybody left their doors open, and parents weren't as concerned about their children being outside late, things of that nature. And I've definitely noticed how that has changed over the past, I would say 15 years or so. I think this reflects several issues. It's something that's very holistic in terms of the contributing factors. And I think consequently, it's going to require the improvement of that situation when it comes to crime is going to necessitate a very holistic approach. I think one of the main factors is that there's so much corruption in Trinidad and Tobago, whether that be within the police force or the Coast Guard, within the government. And there's certain segments of the population who seem to operate with impunity when it comes to influencing how guns and drugs and those things come into the country. And combine that with sometimes lesser opportunities in certain underprivileged areas, right, among certain communities. And I guess you can also say an erosion in moral values, I think. That those things have all contributed, I think, to the increase in crime. And I think that all of those things will have to be addressed and tackled in order for the situation to improve. So that's a main negative thing that I would recognize, or I recognize as having changed during my lifetime. The main positive things, a positive thing I can think of is that I think we are becoming a little bit more open to having certain conversations as a society. I think we still have a really, really long way to go as far as that's concerned. But I think we have moved into that direction, whether it be in regards to gay rights, whether it be in regards to physical, sexual abuse, domestic violence, all these things that, mental illness as well, all these things that we have so many taboos surrounding, both as Trinidadian and Caribbean people. I think we are a little bit more open to having certain dialogue. And I think that has a lot to do with the younger generation. I think the younger people are pushing certain issues at the forefront. And the older heads are somewhat being forced to confront these matters. I think we still have a very long way to go as Trinidadian and Caribbean people, but I do see that, avenues are opening up in regards to discussing those things. So that was my response to my first question. Are we just going to take turns and responding to that first question before I get to the second issue, or should I?
You could go to the second one, yeah.
Okay, so the things, I kind of went through a list of the things I would like to see changed rather. Economically, I want to see our economy more diversified. Trinidad and Tobago has historically, well, for several decades now, been so heavily dependent on the energy sector, whether that be petroleum and natural gas. And even though our economy has moved away a little bit from, well, significantly from petroleum to natural gas export, the economy is still so heavily energy driven. And I think there's so much room for diversification. So I would like us to focus more on the agricultural sector, both in terms of producing for local consumption, but also for export. We have some of the most prestigious, revered cocoa in the world. And obviously, export of our cocoa products has drastically declined, has been at a low for a while now. And I think one good thing is that there are several groups, nonprofit and for-profit groups, who have been working for a change or reversal with that product. So there's a lot of emergence of local companies that are not only focusing on the cocoa raw product, but also on creating chocolate and like high-end chocolate, middle and high-end chocolate for local consumption and for export. And I think that's great. So apart from the agricultural sector, and there's so many other products I wouldn't go into now that we can export, I also see us focused on establishing a true tourism industry, because Trinidad and Tobago, in my opinion, doesn't really have a viable tourism industry. Once again, coming from that same mindset of being energy sector driven, our tourism industry has been relegated to the sidelines, to put it mildly. So I think there's a lot of potential with that, both in terms of us focusing on ecotourism and cultural tourism. Carnival, even as revered as our carnival industry, our carnival is, we haven't even scratched the surface, in my opinion, as far as what we can do with our carnival industry. There's a gamut of things that we need to delve into. And of course, I would like us, one positive thing I think about having a very, for lack of a better term, undeveloped tourism industry is that we still have room to grow it in a way that's sustainable environmentally and socially. Because one of my concerns as a Caribbean person is that so often in the region, tourism isn't developed in a way that's sustainable to the people of the Caribbean. Many times the people of the Caribbean just get the crumbs when it comes to the tourism industry. So I would like us to develop our tourism industry, yes, but do so in a way that's truly beneficial, sustainably so to the people and to the environment. So just quickly, I'll go through the other things. Culturally, I would like us to take more pride in our culture to the point that it's not just lip service we pay around carnival time, but that is something we diligently preserve. And as far as social issues, I touched on this before, I would like us to eradicate the taboo surrounding both mental illness, domestic abuse, and sexual assault and rape. We have a lot more work to do when it comes to addressing these issues. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jenissa. Anika?
I'm up. Underprepared. So I feel like because I have not lived in Trinidad for so long, I do not know where to begin with this first question of how have I seen the country, progress or regress in certain issues. Most of the time I come home is probably just for like 3 months max. And I don't think that is enough time for me to really say that I've noticed anything drastic. A lot of times when I go home, though, it feels the same. And that's shocking. It's like, wait, how are we still doing this? Why is everybody still on board with this? And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I felt growing up in Trinidad and Tobago that I wanted to leave. I didn't feel like I fit in because everybody was, well, a lot of people around me had like their ideas of what life should look like and what life should be. And I was like, that narrative doesn't suit me. I'd like to try something different. And of course, there's a lot of like, why, how, where, just like all of the questions and all of the quote unquote fight down. And I was just like, I'll figure it out, which I did. And so sometimes when I come back home, I'm just like, it is a little bit overwhelmingly disappointing that people are just like still the same in terms of like their thinking, in terms of like, their day to day. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but then they don't like try. And I know that it can be difficult. I come from Gonzales. I grew up in Gonzales, and I used to be like, people would describe it as an at-risk community. Like, I was part of the Tall Man Foundation, which was founded by Anya, Michelle Youngji, and Anya was like, the spokesperson, so that's her mom. And for me, it was a safe space, like a getaway. Like I was able to, circumnavigate the crime and just like have a space where I got to participate in yoga, we went to ballet, we did all kind of stuff that I would never have done. And I feel like that kind of community development was important for me. But like even within the community, like you had these people coming in and offering you a different way of life or a different perspective on things. And a lot of my peers were just like, yeah, no. And I was just like, okay, cool, more for me, I guess. So like when I talk about like, the thinking that I go back home to, things like that, just like, why wouldn't you want to try something else? Why wouldn't you want to, explore what your options are? Especially when somebody is coming in and giving you the opportunity to do that. It's not like that's not happening. So yeah. I feel like a lot of the stuff that Jenissa talked about, I also resonates with me, and I hold to be true as well. When we talk about like moving to the other question now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When we talk about like, you know, the space to innovate and recreate, like when she talked about culture and talking about carnival, I really love how Urban Alves tries to or personifies like the no seasons when it comes to, I love soca. Like for me, that it's soca has given me powers, like in my blood. Like I can't live without it, especially living in Spain and living in these kind of cultures that are, you know, no spice, no vibes. So for me, like soca and my culture is my lifeline. My dad he makes these national instruments, the steel pan. He's a steel pan intonation specialist. And so, like, you know, when I was growing up, he also played with BP Renegades. He traveled the world with them. And, you know, with him as kind of like, you know, a beacon, I'm just like, okay, why then is it just like for carnival? Like this is such a big part of our culture. And he has clients all over the world. So just imagine if like throughout the year we were to extend that. Like people love the steel pan. They are like, I had this opportunity in one of my classes. It was like some real universe stuff. I was just in the class. I usually do nothing. And one of the activities was talking about a school in Barbados. And this school had cricket club, cooking club, and steel pan club. And I was like, oh, we just gonna brush over this? I think not. So, you know, I told them all about my culture. My brother also plays with BP Renegades. So I showed them like a video from the last 2 years when they won the panorama. And the kids were like, so before they wanted to join cooking club or they wanted to join cricket club because nobody knew what steel pan club was. But after the videos and after the little dialogue, everybody wanted to join steel pan club. Like, and I was like, this is the kind of thing that we need to tap into, you know? And so, yeah. Also, so for me, where have I noticed that there's space to innovate and create in our educational system and how it exposes our youth to the rest of the world in terms of foreign language? I was fortunate enough, I went to St. Francis Group College. I was fortunate enough at that school to have access to teachers who were well-versed in the language. I think Mrs. Niles had some Venezuelan heritage, Miss Flores as well. And I also had the opportunity to go to Mexico. I had so many opportunities to experience Spanish. But for me, when it came to Spanish, I also loved the language. A lot of my peers did not. And I had the same experience with them, but at the reverse, I did not like French. And so like my French teacher should be explaining stuff, and I'd just be like, I don't understand what's happening here. And for obvious reasons, like French has, you know, its own phonetic structure and all that fun stuff. But what I'm getting at is the way that we teach languages needs to shift. So when I finally got to UE and my bachelor's degree was in Spanish, we had native language teachers. We had a focus on communication. We learned grammar in a communicative way. So like, yes, you learn the subjunctive and the different past tenses and all of that, but it was more focused on communication than on grammar, which is important. But I think if we want to be a bilingual country by, I don't know when, like did we update the year? We want to be
being updated, right?
Yeah.
I saw something that said 2030, so I don't know.
2030. We want to be bilingual by 2030. I think, you know, we have all of the, you know, immigration, the Venezuelan immigrants coming in.
Mm-hmm.
It mightn't be it might be in a legal way, but I feel like there is an opportunity there to introduce them to our society, to integrate them into our society in a way that helps both of us. Yeah, you speak Spanish, we want to be bilingual. My opportunities to live abroad came from teaching English. They're already there. They speak Spanish. There are ways to, I'm pretty sure there are ways to get them into schools. So each class has a Spanish assistant. Like I'm here in Spain, I'm an English assistant. Each class has a Spanish assistant that they can practice with, that they can have, you know, one-on-one conversations with, that help them culturally with the language. Because I feel like culturally, it's more important than, and we are a society, I think throughout the Caribbean, because we have CSEC and Cape, that is heavily focused on examinations. I don't remember anything I studied for nothing. I got my passes, yeah, my ones and my twos, yay. But like 5 years later, I'm like, okay, and what about it? Now I have, like, you know, the cultural experience that goes with it, that like deepens that knowledge. And I think that that is so important for us to have in any subject in the education system, not just languages, you know? Yeah, I have questions. I feel like I rambled a lot, but that's what
No, you did great. Thank you, Anika. Ruqayyah.
Oh my God, I've just been loving the discussion so far, and I've really been enjoying and relating also to the Spanish, to you know, the tourism and the carnival and stuff like that. Well, I think I'm the youngest person here, so I don't think I would have experienced too many changes in Trinidad and Tobago, because I think realistically the age at which you start to realize certain things, you know, is much older. I mean, unfortunately, you know, we live in a society where we don't encourage our young people. When I refer to young people, I'm talking about our children and our teenagers. We don't really raise them to be conscious individuals and to be individuals that's aware of what's going on in society. We kind of mold them as to just go to school and learn your work, because you have to graduate to be successful. And then they turn into an adult, and then you're bombarded with all of these social issues and responsibilities that you had no idea about. And you know, you just fish out of water, you know what to do, you know. And so I felt like so we learn a lot of things so much later. So if I had to, you know, sort of pick out some of the things that I would have seen change in Trinidad and Tobago over the past couple of years, I would start with the positives first. I have a list of them, so I'll start with the positives first, and then I'll get into the ones that are not so positive. But I've seen a lot more youth participation. I've seen a lot more young people follow their dreams. I'm following my dream, even though it is an academic dream. It's still my dream, you know. I've always wanted to be an economist ever since I was a very, very young girl, and I'm doing that, you know. So I see a lot of young people really following their passion, no matter what that is, and I see a lot of young people getting into politics, getting into business, which is really good as well, getting into culture and stuff like that, you know. And that's wonderful. I see a lot more conversation amongst the state, amongst private sectors, and amongst individuals about diversifying the economy. And I know my parents have always told me that word has been a favorite since that time. So it's really great to see that it's actually becoming like a force now, that for us to really diversify the economy. There's been a lot of infrastructural developments for sure. We've seen a lot of new houses, a lot of new schools, hospitals. I mean, the quality of the education, the quality of the healthcare is definitely questionable. But in terms of infrastructure, we've seen a lot more infrastructure come on board, which is a great thing, because in a lot of countries, the infrastructure is very, very poor, and it's a struggle to really get the infrastructure up there. Something that I've seen is that we've started getting into green energy a bit more. I saw that we have buses in Port of Spain that I remember in 2017, I was a youth ambassador to the US, and the buses that we drove over there were CNG, you know, and I saw one in Port of Spain and I recognized it because I had been in one abroad. I was like, well, since when we have that here? And one of my friends was like, we just actually started bringing them in. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. This is great stuff, you know. I feel as though with through Gates, we've had a lot of tertiary education, you know, come on board and stuff like that. So a lot more people are being able to get degrees way more affordably and stuff like that. Telecommunications, you've seen a rise in telecommunications and how, you know, mobile and digital have kind of transformed themselves. And I've also seen an expansion of the creative industry to beyond just carnival season alone. Like we have fets throughout, we have things like island crashers and, you know, all of these nice things. So those are some of the positives that I have definitely seen through the years that I've been paying attention. Some of the negative that I see that really do affect me personally is obviously the quality of the healthcare and the quality of the education is very poor in my opinion. Just as the speaker before me was saying about how we deliver languages, I feel as though it's the same thing for a lot of fields. For example, I study economics. Whenever I tell people that, they're like, ew, why are you studying it? That's so hard. And I feel it's because of how it's possibly taught. I know it's a very hard field. It's very complex. It's very abstract. But I feel like everything doesn't have to be that abstract if we can just, modify our teaching methods, I've seen the economy really go down, and all parts of the economy as well. I've seen unemployment rise. I mean, as a young person myself, I think if I had to go on the job market, fortunately, I'm in a position where I can just, go to school and not have to think about that. But there are a lot of young people who, want to get jobs and can't get jobs. Obviously, the crime has intensified. There's a lot of rape culture in Trinidad and Tobago. It's absolutely disgusting. Sexual assault, domestic violence, gender-based violence, gang violence, and stuff like that. And of course, a big one is the racial tensions. That is something I have seen manifest over the past couple of years and over the past couple of weeks. That has really, really been something just over the board, and it's something that has really, really bothered me because I'm mixed. So when I seen everybody fighting, I'd be like, yo, also I really can't keep up, So those are some of the changes that I've seen in Trinidad over the past couple of years, and it's very focused on our society. So if I had to answer the question, if I've noticed if there is space, to innovate and create and stimulate change, social change in Trinidad and Tobago, I of course see that. And I feel as though social change is something that there's no formula. It just happens. I mean, with any movement across the world, it happens in so many different ways. And if we're talking about protest culture, a lot of people try to fight down protests and say that, well, you shouldn't riot and you shouldn't do this. But my thing is like, why are you fighting down a social cause? Like that in itself tells me a lot. I was on a panel recently, and one of the speakers, she spoke about, that peaceful protesting. And she was like, slavery didn't end because you wrote a letter. We didn't get all of these things because somebody wrote a letter to the president and got what we wanted. We had to fight and riot for what it is we want. Now, I'm not saying that that's the route that we have to go, because obviously times have changed and there are much more avenues, but there definitely are a lot of avenues for us to create social change. Social media is an excellent tool. Recently, I've been a part of two major campaigns, one being Youth Vote Matter Trinidad and Tobago, where we were encouraging young people to come out and vote because the youth vote is very low. And we've actually taken the project to Jamaica, because Jamaica elections are around the corner, and we want to really expand the project into the other Caribbean territories. And then more recently, I joined a campaign, an anti-discrimination campaign, where we're going to be dissecting race, culture, religion, and xenophobia and stuff like that. So I mean, and it's all on social media, doing lives, coming on Zoom just like we are here and having discussions, and then posting it. All of what we're doing right now is part of social change. And without at the cost of rambling too much, but I just want to say that social change is something that has to come from here. It has to come from you wanting to create that change, because nobody else could really do it for you. It's the same thing, like if you want to switch up your hairstyle, you go to the hairdresser, or you learn how to do it yourself. So it's the same thing. If you want to see your society kind of, turn around, you have to create the social change. You can do so via social media. Get politically involved. I tell that to young people all the time. And politically involved doesn't mean go and wear a red jersey or a yellow jersey, but it means get to know your MPs, get to know your representatives, talk to them, write to them, attend council meetings. And we all like to jump around and assume that our statesmen and stateswomen are absent, but they do consultations. We just don't go, because we say, nah, I'm wasting my time, they're not going to listen to me. But you're just making the job harder. Get involved in NGOs, talk to people, network. That's how you get social change. So I definitely see a lot of opportunity, and I think the landscape is great. And I honestly think, a lot of good changes coming. There's a saying that, before we get peace, there's usually an uprising of so many different things. And right now we can see that uprising racially, socially. And I feel as though that is a sign that right before we calm down, this is what's going to happen. So I'm looking at the situation now, I'm dissecting it, and doing whatever I can in my very own way, and trying to inspire inspire others, you know, also to do the same thing. And that's how a youthful agenda came about. And I was thinking of the name, I was like, a youthful agenda, because the agenda of every young person should be to live a conscious life. I'm not telling everybody you need to change the world, but I'm telling you that just create an agenda to be a more conscious liver, you know. So that's essentially what I think in terms of, you know, creating social change in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you. So I have a follow-up question. I don't know if anybody else has a follow-up question.
I don't have a follow-up question, but as Ruqayyah and Aneakaleigh was speaking, I remembered one other thing I wanted to raise, particularly in regards to changing, I guess, like education, or how that plays a part, how that can play a part in fostering these social changes. So, but I'll let you go first, Susanna.
Oh, I'm going first? Okay. So my follow-up question that I have is, speaking of creating social change, right? One of the things that I really wanted to talk about is how history is taught and passed on in Trinidad and Tobago, and even culture. And one of the things that I've seen having more conversation on social media is how much of our history and culture is being eroded. There's a danger of losing even the Creoles that we speak now. It's really about our existence. And I wonder, what has been your experience with even learning about your culture and history, and how do you see that being passed on today? And how do you think we can improve that, even as people who may be parents in the future?
So that was actually what I was going to.
Okay.
So I was fortunate to grow up in a family that was a little bit more, my parents were a little bit more conscious and more assertive with educating us about the history and culture of Trinidad and Tobago. So my father, and my uncles, and they were part of the Black Power movement in Trinidad and Tobago in 1970 and the late 60s. So I grew up with a very Pan-Africanist and very like culturally and historically patriotic Caribbean and Trinidadian perspective. So I grew up like learning about the Haitian Revolution, about the Maroon revolts in Jamaica, about, you know, like our various rebellions and revolts in Trinidad and Tobago. So that played a large part in my understanding and awareness of our culture and history. I do think, though, that way more needs to be done when it comes to not just for parents passing on these narratives and these stories to their children, but I think the way that history and culture are taught in the Caribbean in schools needs to be transformed. I think the school curricula tend to be still very focused on Europe and North America. I think the vestige of our colonial past. Unfortunately, we weren't conditioned to have a deep appreciation for our history and culture as Caribbean people. So I think when the school is the main source of your education, that accounts for the shortage, that accounts for the lack that many Trinidadian and Caribbean people have when it comes about their history and culture. So that's something that I think needs to be changed. I think literature needs to be more accessible to like Caribbean and Trinidadian literature, whether it be fiction or nonfiction. Like the curricula in schools need to be changed. I think too often our educational system, the approach to education in the Caribbean is still focused on Europe and the US, or North America rather, as opposed to Caribbean and Trinidadian culture and history. So I think that needs to change. I think you ladies had touched on that earlier. And I think the cool thing about it is that in this age of social media, where you have these very unconventional tools that can be used, that one doesn't have to rely on traditional tools anymore to get information out, I think we need to take advantage of that. So yeah. Yeah, and I think, well, just one last thing. For me, as somebody who loves literature and who loves, um, particularly, well, not only, but I tend to try to celebrate books written by people of color and books written by Caribbean authors. It's always surprising to me. I don't know how it is in Jamaica, but I know in TNT, sometimes it's more expensive to buy a book by a Caribbean author locally than buying it abroad. I don't know why that's the case, but I think that's kind of sad to me. And there's just not a wide availability of books as I would like. Like when I was growing up, we had, I think, more libraries and people took their children to libraries more. I'm from Arima, and the library in Arima was one of my first ways to be exposed to the wider world and to the Caribbean outside of Trinidad and Tobago and even within Trinidad and Tobago. And I was heartbroken when some years ago they removed that library, and I don't understand like what the thinking is behind that. So I would love to see more bookstores, more public libraries, and just a greater availability of literature, Caribbean and Trinbagonian literature to local citizens.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because I think one of the things that I've experienced just being on Bookstagram in a space where there's a number of Caribbean people who read and Jamaicans also, they have the same complaint. Like, you can't find as many books available by Caribbean authors that are accessible to people who grew up like us, like to be able to read it for free, and they don't have to go to a bookstore and spend a whole bunch of money for it. And sometimes you can't even find some of the books. I can find them here in America easier than somebody living in the Caribbean can find them, even though they're by Caribbean authors set in the Caribbean. Does it make sense? So, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And before I answer the question, do you mind just repeating it for me, please, so that I can, get my bearings?
So I was saying, in regards to social change, which you were referring to earlier, a lot of us frame our understanding of social change and our understanding of ourselves as Caribbean people through what we understand from our history and culture. And from my experience, I feel like a lot of things are not being passed on as they could be by our parents or grandparents. And it's only when I was older and like in my 20s asking questions to my grandmother that I started to understand even my family history and what was it like living through independence and all those things. Like those are real life experiences that are so valuable, but it's not passed on. And I don't understand completely the thinking, but I think it's just a generational thing where I think very differently about history than my grandmother thought of it. She was just living. So yeah, she was just living.
Yeah.
It wasn't like she's thinking, oh yeah, it's so important to pass this on to my granddaughter because she needs to be able to pass it on. They weren't thinking it so far into the future, right? But no, I'm thinking like, yo, when it's 2062, I want my great grandchildren to have all this very valuable information to pass on and know, oh yeah, what was it like living through Corona? Like, yeah, but those things that our grandparents and parents don't do, and I'd love to know like what was your experience with that growing up, and how do you think you could do it better as well? I'm saying we, but yeah, but you also as Trinbagonians.
Yeah. Okay, well, for me, I definitely think the approach, it's not what you say, but it's how you say it, how you administer the information. I mean, let's face the fact, a lot of us think history is very boring. And why? It's because it's taught like that. It's just this one textbook, and you don't even have real actual pictures in it. And I mean, it's not to say, and I don't like when people use the narrative, well, it's so what, read it how it is. No, you have multiple intelligences. You have to remember that people learn differently. And when you're going to school is supposed to be fun. School is not supposed to be this hard, difficult thing unless you're doing economics. But what I'm saying is that the approach really needs to change. So for example, right, our history is I always say that history and culture are two very important things. Without your history and without your culture, there is not a lot that I think you can consciously do. So, for example, if we just wake up one morning and we lost our memories, imagine how hard it would be for us to survive, you know? And then someone would say, well, you can just create your new memories. But yeah, then you're going to be creating new memories in a world that is not catered towards giving you entirely new memories, because the world is doing its own thing. So that's why history is very important. I mean, people say, but why are you living in the past? And they fail to remember that Haiti was the first Caribbean island to gain independence. And it's because of Haiti, it is because of Haiti that the rest of the Caribbean, you know, fought for themselves. It is because of Haiti. Now, that is just so important. Our culture, we have to remember when the slaves were brought here, the indentured workers were brought here, the cultures that they created, their subcultures, how Black people interacted with the other racial groups and stuff like that, and how they would have assimilated parts of culture. Because remember, they came and they were stripped of everything. So they formed a new culture, right? A new Caribbean, a Creole culture. You know, and all of these things are part of our identity, and we all know that how our personality is our history, our personal history, and our personal culture, the things that our lifestyle, and that's who makes us as individuals. So I feel as though with creating social change and getting people to understand their history and their culture, you have to do so, but you have to do so in a way that it appeals. There's something when you were talking about your grandmother's experience, and you were talking about how your father was in the Black Power movement. My grandfather was in the Black Power movement, and you see that personal experience. When you look through a history book, you don't see anybody's personal experience. I feel like that would be so interesting to read, or bring in someone who was an indentured worker, or someone who was a descendant of a slave, who has, you know, artifacts at home and letters at home and stuff like that. Why is it that I have to go all the way, drive down Moruga, where nobody just go to go and find a museum? Why can't I get that in the city? You know,
but even if I can interject,
sure.
Two things required. Even there is something to be said for folk history and folklore. So it's to find those things in the city, but it's also to find those things in the less urban or more rural areas.
Obviously, for sure.
And we also need to do better to be more inclusive of
everything.
Outside of Port of Spain, of area parts, parts in Lighthouse, right?
Lighthouse, for real,
because that's another
boroughs.
And that's
boroughs. Develop our boroughs, like where we have nothing. And I would love to see something like that. You know what? In your schools, use videos, use art. I remember an amazing project that I had when I was in Form 1 was that when we were learning about the Bering Straits. And how the nomads would have moved from the Siberia and stuff. We actually had to build it. That is creative. That is what gets you to learn. So imagine within our education system, we really just need to change the way that we bring across history. I mean, we do culture fairly well. You know, culture is something that, you know, really, really well. But there's a lot of people that don't even know the history of Carnival and how Carnival came about.
Exactly.
And recently, when we had the Black Lives Matter process happening, and they were happening in Trinidad as well, I remember someone had made the statement, and they were like, what is the purpose of protesting? And I shared an article that a colleague wrote about how you see that same Carnival, they just come and enjoy and bring people from here, there, and everywhere to come and enjoy. And you buy a beaded and your very fancy colors and you go to all the fetes. That would not have happened if it wasn't for a protest. The Canmule riots. I've never ever seen the Canmule riots in my history book. But I know about all of Christopher Columbus's past history, all of this Bartholomew and this Thomas and this Scott and whosoever. We know all of that. But we just don't know it here. So we really need to change and sort of reevaluate the systems, in my opinion.
Yeah, because
I just want to make one statement before Anita goes. Sorry. I think we need to be careful with how we phrase we say slaves, but they were not.
They were enslaved
people.
Yeah, they were enslaved people. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's something I never learned. I learned that as an adult.
Mm-hmm. I only started rephrasing how I said it recently, like this year. Like I started realizing, wait, the way I'm saying slaves, like they were born slaves, is like that's not the truth. Not everybody was just born slaves. They were really enslaved. Like
and it robs them up. It robs our ancestors of their humanity.
humanity. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, Anika. I wanted to address that before.
No, I love how enthusiastic you are about this conversation.
Yeah, that's an important thing to add.
Yeah.
But for me, definitely an important thing to add, because listening to both of you talk, the thing that sticks out for me the most is not just the way in which our history is taught, but who told the story for us to learn it in the first place. And so, like, when we have these discussions about slaves and enslaved, and how Carnival even came about and all that stuff, is because whose story are we telling?
Yeah. Well, the history is told by the victors, right? History is told by the
Exactly. For me, I'm here in Spain, and it always comes up, like, Christopher Columbus, they celebrate Spain Day, you have Plaza de Cristobal Colon, and everybody's happy and everybody's waving the flags and having a good time. And, you bring up the discussion with them, and a lot, like, they don't think about how this celebration of discovering a new world actually wasn't anything to celebrate in the first place.
But if I may interject and just ask you a bit of a kind of difficult question here.
Sure.
I've heard the discussion about, Christopher Columbus and other colonizers and stuff like that from Europe. And the question is, they came and rediscovered spots. You will pillage and thief and rape and do murder and whatever they have to.
Yeah.
So it's understandable that we want to have nothing to do with them because they came and they plundered our country. But for the Europeans, they actually built and contributed well to that country. So I've heard persons ask the question, so is it okay for us to condemn them and then just allow the Europeans to indulge? Now, I don't agree with that at all, because I don't think Hitler is a very celebrated person in Germany,
No.
So I disagree, but I've heard people talk about that. So what are your thoughts on that, since you live in Spain, like your experience with that?
Can you my experience with what exactly?
Your experience with like dealing with that whole Christopher Columbus conversation.
To be honest, it's not even a conversation. Like, Spain, because like when you think about where Spain is now in the world, in comparison to the rest of Europe, Spain is what the rest of Europe would like to call, Northern Europe would like to call, a third world European country. Plain talk, bad manners. And so to live here and to see, after Spain rediscovered the world, they lost a lot of their territories. And so they lost a lot of that quote unquote wealth. And then the history of Spain, many decades later, many centuries later, they went into the Franco dictatorship. A lot of that too, they don't talk about that. So they just remember the stories of Christopher Columbus discovering the world, and they hold on to that because that's all that
they hold on to that lie. It's not even true that he discovered the world. And a lot of that a lot of those riches that these European countries benefited from and helped to push their economies forward for as long as it lasted in various places, was robbed from throughout the world, whether it be from in the Americas or Asia or Africa. So it's like it's their nation, and obviously they have the right, I suppose, to have their national narrative. But that doesn't mean that it's true. It's true, And I think something that's interesting with me, I someone who's lived in the US for a long time. I realized traveling the world that a lot of Europeans like to pride themselves on being so progressive and being so non-racist. And whenever I travel and have those conversations with Europeans throughout the world, I'm always taken aback by it and really annoyed by it. And I call them into account because I'm like, but are you completely oblivious as to the role that your countries played in the oppression of people around the world?
Yeah.
The main difference is the dynamics. The main difference is dynamics, because many European people stayed in Europe, right? While there were emissaries who went to these other places and colonized them and pillaged those places. Whereas in the US, the Europeans came, they were fleeing from Europe, they came to North America, they set up a nation here, and they stayed here while they pillaged, and robbed indigenous Americans and enslaved Africans and whatnot. So I think the fact that a lot of Europeans were further removed from what was happening around the world, that has given them this false sense of independence, that their hands are clean, that their hands are clean when it comes to racism around the world, that their countries have very directly been a part of.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. And so like pretty much that's been my experience. Like when I say it's not a conversation, it's just like they can't wrap their minds around how they could have done any wrong in these situations. And it's just like, okay, I'm not gonna fight a whole country, 57 million people. But like, again, it's like, whose story are we telling? And it's like, I'm part of their story here. Like, they're just like, a lot of them, to me, it's like a slap in the face, because a lot of them don't even know Trinidad and Tobago anyway. So it's like, I just be like, how dare you? But like Jenissa pointed out, a lot of Europeans did not come to the colonies. And that's one of the reasons that they lost Trinidad and Tobago, because most Spanish people didn't want to come that far. They didn't want to go there. So British swooped in.
Actually, sorry to just interject, but I remember just thinking about this. I was like, the Caribbean region is actually unique in the sense that when the Europeans left, they left. In Latin America, there's still, you know what I mean? But in the Caribbean, they just left. So we literally had to start from scratch. And build everything on one culture, history, everything.
Yeah. And so like, it's not shocking to me that we struggle to understand and integrate our history and our culture, because they destroyed everything and kind of left them like, okay guys, get your independence, figure it out. Yeah.
Right.
And so we just like, we stuck with their stories of who we are and where we came from. And now it's a struggle for us to even like wrap our minds around that. Like, Jenissa, you were talking about your parents being Pan-Africanists, and I grew up on Oxford Street, and Kwame Ture, his childhood home is on my street, and I can't tell you how many times I passed in front of that house. I never knew until I was 25.
It's so sad. He was banned from coming back to TNT.
Yeah, I never knew he had anything to do with I didn't even know who he was. Like, and I went to an emancipation march. That was like my last summer in Trinidad. And, they stopped at my street. I was like, hey, why are we stopping here? And then they were talking about Kwame Ture, and I was like, oh, okay. And, it's such a funny story, because like 2 years later, I was in Liverpool and I met up with a Trinidadian, and she took me to see the Black Klansman. And, Kwame Ture was a figure in that movie, and he did a speech and stuff or whatever. And then like on the place that we went to, I think it was the International Museum of Slavery, I believe, in Liverpool. I might be wrong. And so we were there in this hall and watching that movie, and then they had like posters of important Black people of African descent on the walls, and Derek Walcott was one of them, and I wore a Spike Lee poster, and it was just like, it felt to me like some kind of synchronization happening. I was just like, oh my goodness, this is interesting. Me having to leave my country, learn about people from my country, like,
it's crazy.
But that is an interesting thing to say, Anika, because I feel like being outside of the Caribbean has made me realize more things that are inside of the Caribbean. Like while living there, while you're seeped in it, I feel like we are so, I think in our own little silos, like just living, like busy living. and not really evaluating. And I think when you're on the outside looking in, there's certain things
Like you
you
look,
like,
yeah.
and you're like, what the frig? So I would just, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like in this conversation, just like hearing, you know, us not really having the opportunity to talk to our, the older generation about things, like maybe there's a lot of shame in it for them for whatever reason, because like that's how they were taught. That's what they were taught about their cultures, and so they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to expose us to that. And like, even with going to school and in first year and second year, learning English from scratch because we don't talk English. Yeah. We basically learn English from scratch. No, guys, me teaching English abroad, I have like a great memory and I remember everything that, like, all my phonics and everything. That really helped me in this profession because, and it's just like, okay, so I didn't speak English at that age and I had to learn English in this, in this build-up block way, and now I have like a strong foundation in language, but I also speak Trinidadian English Creole, like that is a language, and I feel like ever so often on social media, there's always the conversation of is it or is it not a language? I'm like, of course it's a language. What are you talking about? Like the fact that you can stand up here and say add it to was, and everybody understand you. Like it's not
like language. It's our Creole and it's something that we should be damn proud of.
Exactly. And then I mean that is alive and well for sure on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago. But then you have our French Creole, the patois, Carmen. I never really heard it except for those the radio commercials where they toot bagay, I think it was. You one or two words they would teach us. But that was it for me. Like I had no exposure to that at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And so many phrases that like our Creole, our dialect or language as Trinidadian people is an amalgamation of French patois, or French patois, or broken French. I won't say broken French, I hate that too. Of our French dialect, our local French dialect. A lot of the terms that we use come from our French patois. And they come from our Spanish dialect, they come from our Hindi, and Bhojpuri, whatever dialect. So we have, and there are certain phrases that come from African languages. So Trinidadian English or Trinidadian dialect or language is an amalgamation of all these different heritage.
Exactly. And it's something that we should be proud of. It's not something that we should try to fight down, like as people do all the time. And it's something that even is evolving in and of itself, like even in 2020. And it just amazes me all the time to see it shift and grow and change. I love it.
Exactly. That's a nice note to end on, I think.
Yeah, it is. So in regards to what you were talking about before with Spain, one of the books that I read recently by Earl Lovelace, he said something really interesting, which I never really thought of it. Is like when the Spaniards left, that's their history. Like their history in the Caribbean is their history. Always start when they left. Like, yeah, I'm like, that's a nice way to look at it. Earl Lovelace is always like giving us, yeah.
I know we're still going over time, but I have a question for you because, Susanna, I have long had the impression that Jamaicans are better with preserving and passing on their history and culture than Trinidadians are. Because I feel like
it really does look that way, yeah. It really does look that way.
I feel like Jamaicans are more. I feel you guys are more patriotic for one, like truly patriotic, and I feel like you're also better with with celebrating and passing on your history. Am I mistaken?
You guys have it all wrong. We have the same problem. I've heard it from other Caribbean people too. They're like, oh yeah, Jamaicans are very African. Well, yeah, we have a majority African population, but we also, you see, like, there's a lot of people who look like all of us right here in Jamaica. So we have a mixed population, but then people who might look like Ruqayyah would sometimes identify as just Black. So That's the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. So we have a very Afrocentric population in terms of like on the census, but
Right.
in our mentality, that's not necessarily how it goes, because there's still a lot of prejudices that we perpetrate. There's still
Right. I'm coming down.
there's a lot of history that's not being passed on. So we might be proud to be Jamaican because yes, our culture is like worldwide culture that everybody wants to put on American television and make it look a certain way as if other Caribbean countries don't exist, and they always do it wrong. So that's why I'm like, do it to other people so all the Caribbean can be mad too. Like I'm always like, yes, do it to Trinidadians so they can team up with us, because I'm always looking for other Caribbean people to be mad at
Oh, don't worry. I'm always like annoyed when I hear like the fake Jamaican accent.
oh my God, it drives me crazy.
Bad interpretation. Yeah.
But the problem is that many Jamaicans don't even see a problem with that. So for me, it might be an unpopular opinion where a lot of Jamaicans still want to protect brand Jamaica. I've had experiences like that where it's like Jamaica's a brand instead of a people. Yeah. So even I earlier, Jenissa was saying you want tourism to be more sustainable and be more about the people. Right now, tourism exists as like should I say like an industry where it's just for white people and not really for the people. It's not beneficial. It's like we're in servitude. It's like another neocolonialism.
Right.
So,
And that's a real thing we gotta change in the Caribbean, you know. Real thing.
Have you guys read touching on that topic? Have you read A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid?
So not yet.
Economists might appreciate that too. Did I tell you about it before, Susanna?
Yeah, like I've been hearing about this book.
I'll send you the link. It's an essay by Jamaica Kincaid, the Antiguan author, and it's about how tourism in the Caribbean often operates as neocolonialism.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It's real good. It's real good.
Yeah, so like tourism in Jamaica, some Jamaicans might not see a big problem with it. And of course, I want to have more conversations around this because I feel like, am I alone in how I do not like tourism anymore? Like, it's the biggest part of our economy. Like,
Yeah.
and that's how they treat it, because it's the biggest revenue producing industry. They treat it as if it is it. Like, they immediately want to let in tourists. They don't care about the people. And if they're building developments in certain parts of the country, it's really just about the tourists and not really looking at how it can benefit the people. It's at risk of the people. And when tourists come in, they don't even want to associate with regular Jamaicans.
They want to stay on the resorts and they don't want,
I've talked to many people here in the US, in New York, who have said, oh yeah, I've been to Jamaica and blah, 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 blah. And say, I talked to this girl who was in my class and she's Chinese, or we're in a Chinese class together, like the Chinese literature. So it's like, oh, so you've been to Jamaica, so have you seen like the Chinese population that we have in Jamaica? Because and she was like, no, there's Chinese people in Jamaica. I'm like, yeah, there's a whole Chinese population, there's a whole Chinese communities, associations, all of that. She was like, oh, I didn't know that. She's like, I didn't really go outside. I'm like, oh, okay, okay, that's right. In the all-inclusive resorts. So it's a whole bunch of problems. So the image that Jamaica has is really, I think a lot has to do with like the Rastafarian population, because people see the Rastafarians and think it's like all of us are very conscious, but not all of us are conscious. There's still a lot of issues. Just like how we have divisions among Trinidadians, we have divisions too, and classism is a big thing, which is also linked to a history of racism. But Jamaicans will tell you there's no racism issue; it's classism. But color matters. Color matters.
I've witnessed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
we need to have like a part 2 and 3 and whatnot of this stuff. So many other things.
I've heard that, but I really hope to have more conversations about these particular things, because this was all a big conversation. So it's just no way to put all of it in one. So I definitely want to do this again. Thank you so much for doing this today. And I love all your contributions. I really enjoyed it. It got away from me. I was like, oh, I don't even care about the time anymore. So, I was really enjoying it. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for reaching out. I feel like I'm such a young mind in all of these things. I'm super grateful. Thank you, but I'm super grateful to interact with all of you. You guys come with so much, knowledge and experience and stuff like that. And I feel very much like a baby in space, but I'm so grateful. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I hope to, have more discussions and you have me whenever you need me.
Thank you.
Feeling is I'm the same. Thank you for having me, Susanna.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more Caribbean conversation.